Shapes. Vector shapes in Photoshop and Affinity Photo. Both applications have them. However, there are definitely quirks how to use them in Photo as well as Photoshop. So let's just run through it and see which ones win. Of course, if you don't use shapes at all, there may not be any use for this at all. However, let's just go over here in Affinity. Affinity comes with a lot of shapes, whole range of them. However, of course, Photoshop does as well. You've got the custom shapes, but the difference is all these shapes are all editable. They've all got their interactive controls. You can modify them in numerous ways. You can't in Photoshop. So let's just go through some of these ones. Like double star tool, you've got the star tools, triangles, etc. All the same sort of things that are in Photoshop, you can find here. However, double star tool, that's unique. Just creates that. And the thing is, with Affinity, you've got these lovely controls all along here. You've got here all the standard things you can do in Photoshop, of course, as well. Apply fills, click there. You've got gradients. Go to the gradient tool, add a gradient, and so on. So there's a variety of different colors you can add. However, it does come with these options, which you can tweak and change in a radius. But it's also got this. It's got some interactive sliders, which I think is great. Very nice feature. Now just quickly create this and just drag that down, and you can modify it to your heart's content. And you can tweak them here as well if you wish. And literally you can create thousands of different shapes. And the great thing about this is that you can also save this. So you create a design, you think, this is amazing. Well, just go here and click here. And you can set up a preset, create preset. So you can just add it there. Preset number 5, well, I'll give it a number, I don't know. Hopefully that doesn't clash with anything. However, they're the presets. And you can just simply select it. One minor thing, it closes. I wish it didn't do that. You click there, it closes. Click there, and you can run through the shapes, but it does close, and it does mean you have to go and open it up again. But you can tweak all these settings. You've got dashes, you've also got brush stroke and those sort of things. Whole range of different things. However, that's in Designer. I'm not certain why it's actually there, because if you go on it, it doesn't work particularly. However, this does have really quite a nice feature here of arrows. So you can add arrows to it as well. I'm not certain why you'd want to, but I guess if you've got a fill here and you can set the fill to nothing, you've got a nice design there. But sadly, you can't separate that, which would be nice. That would make it more effective. So you've got those shapes, but you've got other shapes as well. So let's just remove that one. And you go here, arrow tool. Now again, there's lots of arrows in Photoshop, arrow shapes, so you can create that arrow there. But however, you'll notice here, you've got the interactive controls again, which does give a lot more flexibility. Make a thin arrow there. You can change these, the ends. You've got all these controls, and you can modify these as well, which is really quite nice. Very effective, very useful. However, you'll notice one issue with this, and I've been creating now a few shapes, and there's some more. You've got cogs. Cog tool is something that's really good. However, every time you add them, it's a vector. So vector design, it's not a pixel layer. This is something you can do in Photoshop very easily. You can just set it up as a pixel. Here, what you have to do, you've got here layer, and you go down to rasterize, or you can merge visible if you want to add them as a pixel. Just means an extra couple of steps messing around to get that. But I think it's still basically, they work really well, and with the interactive features, I think are great. However, what you can also do is you can convert to curves. You can't do it automatically. In Photoshop, you can if you change, go to like a rectangle, and it's a particular type of it's a rectangle, you can convert to curves simply just by moving the point. Here, you need to go to convert to curves. Once you've done that, click there. You can't use it after that as a cog, but you can simply go here to the node tool. So the node tool, you can select these nodes. Each of these can be modified and changed and tweaked. You can do again something very similar in Photoshop. So it's not a massive change, but I find it a very flexible way of working. Now, what you can do, go to Photoshop. In Photoshop, you have all the shapes via the Tools panel in exactly the same way. However, the range of tools, a bit more limited, which is unusual considering how long Photoshop's been around. They've never really added a vast... When they did add one, they added the triangle tool, which basically is the Polygon tool, just with 3 sides. Doesn't seem to be much use. And yet they didn't split it into the star tool, which I would have loved to have seen a proper star tool, as well as, of course, a gear and many other shapes as well. And it is a pity that they've never done much with that. However, you can run through his line tool. They all work very well. There's nothing wrong with them. However, probably the key tool here is custom shape tool, because that does mean you can access literally thousands of designs. So if you go here, custom shape tool, go up here, and I'm using the shape option. And I will go through that in a few minutes, the other ones. So their shape option, literally you've got thousands and thousands of different designs. So you can go here, film, select that. Now there's no film tool in Affinity Photo. So straight away you've got something that's really useful, but there's no interactivity. So you've got objects here, you can click here and you can find some interesting ones. You haven't got a hand tool. Well, you have got a hand tool, but not a hand shape tool. That would be even nicer. Not certain why you would want a hand shape tool, but still you've got that hand shape. Maybe not the world's greatest hand shape, but it is a hand shape. But you, of course, can still modify it. You can modify all these shapes. Simply go here to Direct Selection Tool, similar to the Node tool in Affinity, and you can select the points. And you can modify them. You can change you can just change settings to create a variety of different hands. So you're not fixed with, but there's no control for this. You can't sort of tweak it and say, I want thinner fingers or something, or a thicker thumb. You can't do that. But it does mean you've got lots and lots of different shapes, and they're all great shapes. And of course, what you can also do is find zillions of other shapes on the web. Now, it would be brilliant if Affinity Photo could allow access to custom shapes, because it hasn't got a custom shape tool. It'd be nice to have its own selection of custom shapes that you can just readily accessible. There's an assets where you can bring things in. But it's not really that effective, I think, compared with something like this, a custom shape tool that's really dedicated to this. However, you've got here shapes. You can change the colour. So you can click here and you can change red, you've got gradients, and you've got patterns. Exactly the same as in Affinity. However, I find the patterns and scaling angle, it's not interactive, nor is the gradient. So all those things, you can set them up, but it's not so flexible as probably in Affinity. I think that Affinity is much nicer. You've got a lovely, you can control, just add it on the actual image itself. That would be nice, but that isn't there. But what you can do, you can also set up various things of defined proportions, something again that's defined size, fixed size, which doesn't seem that important, but is not something that you can do in Affinity. As far as I'm aware, there's no defined proportions or defined size feature, and that actually is quite nice for adding things particular size. So that's useful. You've got all these other options as well for dashes. Again, something you can do in Affinity as well. However, what you can also do is you've got here path. So path, basically much the same as shape, but instead of having, it's got no fill and it's got no stroke. But it's useful if you're going to go over here and you've got type and you want to add some text there on type. Again, something you can do in Affinity. Also, you can run various filters. So there's filters here. You go into render and you've got flame. It will use the path, which is useful. But I must admit, I don't use the path as much as I used to. So you undo that. Again, go here to the shape tool, custom shapes, and you've also got the option here of pixels. So pixels, this is something that's not available in Affinity Photo without having to rasterize out merging the shapes. So it's great that you can just do it straight away. You can just go here and just add the shape very quickly in the current color. So if you go over here, set the color, make it orange, and then add the color, and you can apply it again. However, you can't add a stroke to this. So if you want to add a stroke, you have to go up here and do shape, and then you can create your design. It's got a stroke, and then go to layer and again merge down, flatten image, etc., which sort of slightly defeats the purpose of shapes. I've never understood why there isn't a stroke for that. However, or gradients either. But you have got a lot of different designs. Now, rectangle tool, if you go to the rectangle tool, and I'm going to use it in the shape, if you just drag that out, you can see you have got some interactive controls. You can manipulate these round rectangles, so you can create that. Now, which is slightly odd. At one time we did have, for quite a while, a rounded rectangle tool. Luckily that has gone, but that's it. You can modify size, and also you've got here properties, so you can change them over here. You've also got angle over here. So you've got a variety of different tools. But if you go here to Polygon Tool, if I go there, you've got the tools up here, the features, you've got 20 points, etc. You can click here, you can say star ratio 20. Let's just add a star now. There's a star. However, you've got this control. You can modify that. But that's really about it. But there's no interactive controls. So you can't go on this tool like you can in Affinity Photo and actually modify it on the star itself, which is a real pity. I think that's something that's really lacking in Photoshop. It would be nice to add that. But in terms of all the other things, if I remove those, you've got options here, and if I create rectangle there, create that, you can combine shapes, you can subtract shapes, just simply select them all, go to layer and combine shapes, subtract front shape, etc. You can do much the same in Affinity Photo as well. What you can also do is you can go over here and you can add effects. So click here, you've got bevel and emboss, and you can add some, I think the range fairly reasonable. Satin, you've got satin here. Well, actually it's not there to play. It is there, so you can see satin there. That's about the only thing that's really not in Affinity Photo. I think it's quite a nice effect. I'm not certain why that hasn't been added. But you've got all the others, stroke, inner glow, colour overlay, gradient overlay, which you can add to shapes. Click OK there. In Photoshop, if you want to add effects to shapes, you can. However, as soon as you do it, it will be rasterized. Or you can turn it into a smart object. So you can go over here to Filter, and you can go down here to one of these filters, Blur, say Gaussian Blur, and it will say Convert to Smart Object. You can also rasterize it, so it just becomes a raster pixel layer. Convert to Smart Object, and you can apply the effect. Now if you go over here to the layers, you can still see here Smart Filter. And you can remove it. So if you decide, you know what, you want it back to a sharp object again, you can just remove it or put it back on again. What you can also do is you've got here Smart Objects. You can click on this. So double click. Once you're in there, you can interactively modify. The triangle tool also is interactive. Not many tools are. Weirdly, let's say the star tool isn't. So you can just change it. Say you want to tweak that. You can resize it. Maybe rotate it. And then you can close it. Now this document's a PSP document. What you can also do is you can add additional ones. So you can hold down the Alt Option key and duplicate. So you've got two there in there. You can close it, save. So it's slightly odd the way it does it, but you can see the effect there. You see the result of that. Smart, and you can add more than one. However, of course, in Affinity, you can go to Affinity and let's just remove those. Just add a shape. Say the rectangle tool, fill there, and then you go to layer, and you can go to new live filter layer. Now, if you use the filters, it will rasterize it. But you have got, in this case, you've got, say, twirl. Apply a twirl effect to this. So twirl, you can modify it, tweak it, add a little bit of a twirl there. You've got blending modes, etc., and close it. However, you'll notice it's still a rectangle. It's still a vector shape, which you can remove this. You can still go over here and you can tweak it. So select. Now I need to select that and convert it to curves if I want to modify the actual point. So convert to curves, and it's still got that effect. Go here to the node tool and I can modify that. So I can tweak it, expand that again, and put the twirl back in again. Now, if the twirl isn't seen there, what you can do, you can double click, and that brings up the panel again. And then you can modify it, maybe reposition the twirl. Obviously the twirl was slightly off from where I was before. And you can close it. So it's still live. It's still live even now. So it's basically the same as smart filters in Photoshop. So you can use this as well. However, Affinity Photo does have one great shape feature that I really like, and that's brushes. So you got over here, paintbrush tool. If I go there and select paintbrush, now I can paint. I can paint on my shapes. You can't do that in Photoshop. I mean, you can convert it into a normal layer and then work with it, but that's not ideal. And of course you can always just add an image on top of it. And of course you can do that, but it's really nice that you've got that flexibility of still having this rectangle as a live shape, and you've still got this pixel feature where you can just modify and add brush strokes and gradients, etc. to your design. So you can do a whole range of different things that you really can't do particularly easily in Photoshop, though you can always have workarounds to do that, obviously adding images on top, etc. But I think that there's flexibility in both. I love the fact that in Photoshop you've got shape, you've got pixels, and you've got the path, whereas you haven't got that in Affinity. But I think that some of the features like this pixel is a great feature. I love the interactive controls. They are so much better. Also, I love the fact that you've got gears, cogs, hearts, etc. in Affinity. But Affinity does lack the custom shapes feature that I would love to see. So there are definitely things that are good and bad in both applications. I think the presets approach for Photoshop, for the storing of information, is not as good as Affinity's. I think Affinity wins hands down there, so that's something that's good for Affinity. But overall, I think they've all got great features. Lots and lots of shapes to use, which you can use and combine. You can rasterize, you can use them as brush strokes, you can use them with pattern designs. Literally thousands of possible uses in both applications. And of course, if you have got both applications, and I've got obviously Affinity and Photoshop, you can always create shapes in one that you can't particularly create in the other, and you can always copy them into the other application, so that's super useful as well. However, there are still lots of things I would love to see in addition. But for you, which one do you think wins? Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer Affinity? Do you prefer Photoshop? Neither? I think there's some great features, and I'd love to hear from you about how you think you use it. And will you be using them? Will you be using them in future? Maybe you don't use shapes normally. Maybe you just ignore the vector side. It's quite possible you just use it purely as a pixel application. Do you use shapes at all in the vector format or pass? Anyway, hope you found this of interest. Any questions, please leave in the comments below. Any comments, please leave as well. It'd be great to hear from you. Thank you much.